Welcome everyone to our session on using Qualtrics. This afternoon, we are pleased to welcome Chris Hernandez, who is the Senior Survey Research Analyst for the Office of Institutional Effectiveness here at Fresno State. And Chris has been gracious enough to give us his time to give us an overview and an introduction to Qualtrics and how it can be used in your research. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor and the mic over to Chris.
Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Chris Hernandez. I'm with OIE. I'll just be kind of going through Qualtrics, sort of an introductory session today. And I'll try to be cognizant of the time. I know we have about 45 minutes today, but just so that everyone is aware, there is a lot more that can be done with this tool. We can spend hours and hours in training and showing you some of the more detailed nuances and everything. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this, as you are creating your own survey projects. There might be other options that might be a little bit more hidden. And you can always feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully my contact information can be added to this somewhere to the recording. You can feel free to email me if you have more questions or need help with survey projects in the future. All right, so let's jump right in. I will go ahead and share my screen. All right, so what I am showing everyone here is the kind of landing page, the home page for our Qualtrics license. So campus-wide, we have a Qualtrics license that is available to all students and employees. You can go to our designated login page at qualtrics.fresnostate.edu. And you can log in or create an account with your Fresno State username and password. So you're using your same university credentials to create your account. And at that point, it'll become part of our campus license, which opens up a lot of other capabilities with the tool. You can collaborate or share projects amongst one another. If you're have multiple people that need to do or they need to be able to edit a survey, you have that capability, again, as long as everyone has an account within our license. Okay, so once you create your account and you log in, you'll kind of land on this page. And I just want to point out a few of the things that you can see on this home page here. First, you'll notice right here in the main body of the page are the list of surveys that you might have on your account. So you always have the name here. And then you end up with a few other things depending on the status. So right here, you'll end up with your status. New just means it's something that you are building. You haven't maybe yet activated it yet. As you can see here, active means that you have opened it up. It is available to collect responses. And then next you have questions. So the number of questions you have, if you have multiple languages or responses, again, you see how these change depending on the status. That gives you just a little bit more information. And then this last piece is just kind of quick shot of a couple of different useful pieces. One, for new status items or surveys, this will give you an estimation of your response time, which is always useful when you're sending out invitations to your survey. I would always recommend adding in an approximation for how long a respondent might take to participate. So that's kind of gives you that gives you that estimation right here. For active surveys, this kind of just shows you a 12-day trend of your responses. So how many responses you're getting on a daily basis. If you start seeing, a decline, perhaps that tells you need to do another reminder or, some other piece of marketing to get people to participate in your survey. On the left-hand side are your potential folders. So you can toggle this on and off by clicking this folder button here. By default, you end up with an all projects, which is just that, where all of your survey projects would be listed. You have a shared with me folder. And again, this is where that collaboration or those shared surveys come into play. If you have other people who have shared surveys with you, you click this drop down and then you can look by name of the person who might have shared a survey with you. Below that, you have kind of your created folders. Again, by default, you'll have an uncategorized folder. That is where everything will go initially, unless you create folders and drag and drop them. So you can always do that by clicking this add new folder here. you give it a name, and then essentially you can drag and drop your surveys into that folder. So as you start building more and more survey projects, you're going to end up with a need for organization, and that just provides that need over here. Up at the top here, I just want to show a different view. So this is kind of the default, what they call the pill view, if you will. It's just kind of larger bars here. You can also click this button and go to a list view, which shows a little bit more information about the about individual surveys. It's a little bit more compact. So just depending on your preference, you can change that as well. And then on the right-hand side, at the end of every survey, you will end up with these kind of 3 dots here. And this is kind of your quick button menu. So this is where you can quickly do a lot of different things for your surveys or jump to individual sections of the surveys. So for instance, you can activate or deactivate your survey using this quick button up here. This collaborate button, this is again where you can share your survey project with others. You can reveal in folder, which just means, it'll show you what folder you might have dropped that project into. You can rename and copy projects. And then everything down below is where you start getting into different sections of your survey. I won't really go into those in detail here because we're going to go through it step by step. But this is just kind of your quick actions right here in this dropdown. And then finally, I will mention you are able to delete projects here. Just keep in mind that once a project is deleted, it cannot be recovered, and it will actually pop up and ask you, are you sure you want to delete it? So you can't, accidentally click this button and still move forward with deletion. But you are able to remove projects if they are no longer needed. Okay. So let's go into survey creation. So to do that, you can just click this blue button here in the upper right corner. When you click that button, it brings up a new menu and you have a few different options for creating surveys. Most of the time, I'm sure most users will end up creating your own survey, which is this first option at the top. This just takes you into a blank survey template that you can begin building your survey in. You can do a lot more, and it's kind of just a blank slate, but you can do a lot more customization this way. You also have options down below, which are pre-built survey templates that come from Qualtrics. I should point out that although Qualtrics began in academia, it has kind of moved into big business solutions. So a lot of the templates that you'll see here are probably going to be more geared towards, marketing products, employee engagement, something like that. But sometimes there might be something that will have some questions that might be useful to you, or might be something that you can kind of take pieces of or edit those down. So, on your own time, feel free to come through some of these. They might give you some good ideas for some of the survey projects you might have. But like I said, for the most part, we're going to stick up here in the top, create our own survey. That brings up this next menu where you just give it a name. And as you can see, there are also more options down below. You can create a blank project. Again, that's probably what you're going to use about 99% of the time. You also have the option of creating a copy. So usually when you do something in Qualtrics, you're able to make copies, or you never have to do that again, essentially. So if you have a survey that repeats, say, every semester, rather than rebuilding it each time, you can just create a copy of it and then maybe change the few sentences that you need or edit it as necessary. But it's going to create an entire copy of the original survey. And these last two are getting a little bit more kind of into the weeds there, so I won't really cover those, but you have a couple of other options as well. In this case, let's go forward with creating a blank project. So just click the Get Started button. And then this will bring me into the survey editor window, which looks like this. You'll notice that by default, it kind of comes up with a multiple choice question right here on the main body. Everything that you see on the main page is editable because it's your blank survey. You can change it as necessary. And in this case, with this default multiple choice question type, say, actually, I don't want it to be multiple choice. I want to change it to something else. All of the options for each individual question are going to kind of open up on this right side menu. The first thing to note up here at the top is how you can change your question type, and it's just simply clicking this drop down. This opens up the menu of question groupings that you have available within Qualtrics. And if you hover over any of them, it also gives you kind of a pop-up example of what an example question might be for that. It usually starts kind of most commonly used questions at the top, working your way down to more advanced or specialty questions towards the bottom. As you can see here at the top, you have just descriptive text. So for instance, if I just wanted to have an introductory text at the top or instructions, nothing that I'll need a response for, I can click on descriptive text and it will change that and remove the answer choices that you see here. Next on the right-hand side is a graphic. So again, if you want to have a picture, some sort of graphic at the top of your survey, you can do that as well. Just note that a lot of times you might end up with you might end up with a library of different options that you can have for graphics. So you can always upload your own though as needed. Next, you come into the multiple choice question grouping, which is again, which you see by default. But if you click this drop down here, now you get an idea of all of the different types of multiple choice questions that are available to you. So it doesn't have to be the standard, what you see here, vertical single answer, which is this right here. Instead, you can do, say drop-down lists. You can arrange the answers horizontally. You can do graphics. You can do multiple answer columns, so that kind of check all that apply questions. So there's a lot of different options that you have, even within a multiple choice question type. The next kind of most common one is the matrix table. So as you can see here, it's the common Likert type scale response. Say very satisfied to very dissatisfied, strongly agree to strongly disagree. And again, you have options even within matrix tables. So you can do this kind of bipolar matrix table. The most common again is this Likert single answer. You can even do multiple answer. You can do drop downs. There's a lot of different options again that you have just within matrix tables. Next one is text entry. And again, it's pretty straightforward. It's open-ended text. So if you're asking somebody to give a free response to something, you can click this option. The only changes that you might get here are how big of a text box that you want to include on your survey. So it's pretty straightforward, single line, multi-line, or essay size box. So just kind of gives your respondent an indication of how much you expect them to maybe write or respond for your survey question. And then this last one I want to point out is a form question type. And as you can see here, it's very useful when you're kind of gathering information, a series of information from your respondent. So a lot of times when we build things, build like forms or applications in Qualtrics, we use this form question type. So you can get names, email addresses, student IDs, something like that. And then beyond that, that's kind of the end of the most commonly used ones. But I do want to point out a couple of others just for kind of for novelty, I guess, for your surveys. And it kind of helps your respondents stay a little bit more engaged. One is a slider question. So again, if you're asking students, or excuse me, you're asking your respondents to rate something, you can do that with bars or sliders, or even in this case, you can even do stars. What would you rate this on a 1 to 5 scale? Rather than being a 1 to 5 scale, you can say 1 to 5 stars, and it just becomes a little bit more of a novel experience for your respondents. And then lastly, on this grouping, I want to just point out the side-by-side question type. This one isn't used nearly as much as I think it should be, but it allows for essentially 2 matrix style questions side by side, where you're asking maybe 2 different things about the same topic. So in this case, you see the options for the example question is about pizza chains. So perhaps the first set of questions could ask you to give a rating of that pizza chain, and then the second could be, how often do you go to that pizza chain? So you can ask 2 different questions about the same topic, and it helps to kind of consolidate your survey a little bit more, and it makes for an easier response for your respondents, actually. The rest of these down below, again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through these very much. I want to be able to cover kind of start to finish of a survey, but again, you can feel free to come through here, play around with these, hover over them, and you can change your question types as necessary and see what works best for you. Okay, so I'm going to go back out here. And I just want to go back through the other options that you have on the right-hand menu over here. So for multiple choice question type, you also have the option to add or remove choices right here with this button. You can edit multiple things at once. So rather than typing in individual choices, you can do the entire set right here, and it recognizes line breaks. So as long as you have a line break in between each thing, it'll put it on a different response choice. You also have the option of automatic choices. Now, this is a pretty useful Qualtrics tool, in my opinion, especially when you're trying to think of how to properly balance your response scale. So if I click that button, you see it opens up another drop-down menu, and this will kind of just give you a lot of balanced scaled options for commonly used response scales. So as you can see here, if you have an agreement scale, a satisfaction scale, true, false, yes, no, worse, better. So there's just a pretty, I wouldn't say it's an entirely exhaustive list here, but it's a really strong list that you can kind of go through, and it just gives you a lot of different options so you can just automatically fill in your response choices. I use it quite a bit, especially for the matrix style or the Likert type scales. But in other cases, you know, they might give me some good options when I'm trying to think of a response scale.
Chris, I have a question. May I ask a question?
Yes.
So, and looking, my name is Mary Garza. Oh, let me put, and I apologize for being a little bit late. I was teaching. The question you discussed earlier, side by side, which is similar to a Likert scale. What's the difference between that format and this format in a multiple choice format? Is it the same thing?
Sure. I can show you actually. So this is it's essentially the same thing as far as the responses that you're going to get, but it displays and it kind of flows a little bit differently. So for instance, this is what a agreement scale multiple choice question would look like. I can come up here and change it to a matrix table. And then this is what you're going to end up with. And again, this is a very common one that we use a lot. Or I can come over here to side-by-side question. And I know in this case, it kept these as the responses, but say these are your individual topics. Now you get an idea of how many different things you can ask. So perhaps this would be overall rating, and then this column could be importance rating, or and then this last column could be something entirely different. But you get an idea of how many different kind of matrix style or multiple choice questions that you can ask at once, rather than it being so spaced out and maybe taking, you know, pages and pages of individual survey questions.
I see. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. So let me just go back to multiple choice, and I'll just kind of keep going down this list here. Again, these are all just kind of quick buttons to change the individual options, and all of these will vary based on the question type. So for instance, multiple choice questions, if I want to quickly change it to a multiple answer, I can click this button here, and you'll notice that the response box is changed to squares. That's also a nice kind of visual indicator as you're building your survey. If you see circular buttons, those are single answer, squares will be multiple answer. And then I can also even change this to a drop-down list. It's just kind of quick on-the-fly buttons here on the right. I can also then change the position if I'd like. So again, default is vertical, but perhaps I wanted to go horizontally across the page. I can do that here. And then these last options down below, these are going to essentially be universal for almost every question type. The first you'll see is a forced response. So if I check that box, it will force the respondent or the participant to respond to this question before moving on. So they can't move on, they can't submit the responses until they answer that question. I would just be careful with this forced response button. Typically for surveys, you know, we open them up and we ask people to participate, and we ask them to volunteer for this. And as such, they are able to skip questions as necessary, or if they're uncomfortable asking something. So I would definitely not recommend using forced response for every single question on your survey, but if there are a few that are essential to your project, then you can always use that option. The other thing that you can see here under the dropdown is a request response. The difference there is that if the respondent tries to continue without giving a response to a survey question, just a pop-up box will come up and essentially ask them, are you sure you want to leave this blank? So this just kind of helps cut down on skipped questions that were purposefully skipped, and skipped questions that were accidentally skipped. Okay. And then validation type, again, there isn't much that you can do with multiple choice, but if I were to change this to say a text entry question, validation type becomes pretty useful for things like the type of response that you're going to allow your respondent to give here. So for instance, if I click on content validation, I can make sure that depending on what I'm asking of the respondent there, I can make sure that it comes in as an email address, a phone number, specific date format, numeric response only. So again, there's a lot of different options you can have with content validation, but most of the time I just use it with text entry questions. You can also do a minimum and maximum length or a character range. So say you want it to only be 500 character limit on your text box, you can set something like that as well. Again, if you come across any questions about these, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you set some of these up as well. And then lastly, at the bottom are actions, and these are universal for every question type. These are more to help a little bit more with organization of your survey. The first thing is adding a page break. So if I click that button, you'll see that now this page break has been added right below this question. And this is just that. It adds a page break there so that you'll have to click, say, a next button to move on to the second page or third page. I generally recommend using page breaks to minimize the amount of vertical scrolling. Excuse me, if you have about 20 questions on your survey, it might become a little confusing as respondents are scrolling up and down to make sure they don't skip things. I personally, prefer to minimize that and rather them go back and forth to page 1, page 2, page 3. And you can accomplish that by adding in page breaks like that. The next is display and skip logic. So these are useful if you have secondary questions that are, say, conditional upon a previous response. So for instance, let's change this back to a multiple choice. And I will just create a new question here and say, for instance, I want to add display logic here. So say the second question, I only want it to come up, or I only want it to display for people who responded as strongly agree to the first question. So I basically set up this if-then statement. And as you can see here, it's display this question only if the following condition is met. In this case, if a question, in this case Q1, and then if strongly agree is selected, then I want this question to display, and I'll save that. So you'll see this kind of blue bar appear here, and this will be set up on an individual question by question basis. But again, it's very useful for those situations in your surveys where you might have otherwise said, if yes, please explain, or if yes, here's a follow-up question. In this case, you're not kind of relying on the respondent to kind of remember their previous responses. In this case, it's built in and it will only come up for people who answer the way that you indicate on the previous question. So kind of no more guesswork there.
Chris, question.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there's a question on, and I think this would be the format, but I'm not sure, if they stated that they were dissatisfied with a program component or something, or dissatisfied with something. If they answer dissatisfied, then we can actually have this if-then statement, and then we can tailor that question as to what were you satisfied, what were the components you were dissatisfied, or even if they said they were satisfied, kind of like an open-ended question, so they could be more specific as to elaborate on that question.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a good point. So let's just kind of play that out. So for instance, this is just, again, a default multiple choice. I can change this to a text entry. So this is kind of, please explain your answer. Please explain why you're satisfied or dissatisfied. And in this case, just for the simple example I gave, I set it up as a strongly agree here is selected. I can always edit those question or that condition by coming to this dropdown, click on edit. And say, for instance, I want this to actually be for someone who said somewhat agree or strongly disagree. And we can always add additional layers or elements to this. So if they selected somewhat disagree, and then I'm going to change this to an or, because you can only select one option. If they selected somewhat disagree or, oh, there it is. disagree, or somewhat disagree. So if either one of these is selected on the previous question, then this question will pop up for them, and you can ask them, please explain why you were dissatisfied or why you disagree.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, so continuing down this menu over here, the next one is skip logic, and it accomplishes something very similar to display logic in that it's just that it skips down to a different question depending on the condition that you set up. So, or excuse me, skips down to a different question depending on the condition you set up. So let's just add a couple of more questions here. And let's say that if they agreed or strongly agreed to this question up at the top, then I want to just go ahead and skip question 2 and 3 and come down to question 4. So if I'm up in here, question number 1, I can come over here to the skip question menu, or excuse me, skip logic menu. That then brings up this gray bar for this question, and it's very similar to display logic. You set up almost like an if-then condition. So if strongly agree is selected, then I want to skip to question 4, and we'll click done. And it kind of gives you this almost like a skip indicator. So this purple box here you can see is now going to be down here at Q4. So it's kind of a visual indicator saying, from this condition, I'm going to skip down to this question. So again, instead of setting up individual display logic for, say, a series of follow-up questions, you can then skip to a different, skip all of those questions and come down to the next relevant one for your respondent. So again, it's just a way to help kind of organize and display your survey questions a little bit better and a little bit more seamlessly to your respondents. Okay, next one is a copy question. So it's just that, create an exact copy. I click that, it brings it right down. I can then edit as necessary. So again, very useful, say for instance, if I made a copy of this question, I have my response choices already laid out here, and say all that's going to change is the question text. I can click here, make that edit, and I'm not having to set up the entire question over again. So it's always useful if you're going to continue on with, say, response skills or questions that maybe one word of the question changes. So
that's very helpful.
Yeah, how satisfied were you? And the next question is how much did you enjoy this, or something like that. So again, pretty useful for that. Next is move question. So you have a couple of options as you're reordering your question set here. So for instance, I made this copy of question 1. As you can see, it comes up at question 6, and it just kind of keeps numbering the questions based on the order that you created them. But I want this to go to the bottom. So I can either click these buttons here, and again, each time I click one, it's just going to move one space down, or I can click on move question, and it kind of becomes this floating light blue bar. I can just scroll down to where I would like it and click and drop it basically. So it's just doing exactly that. You're moving the question up and down a little bit easier than having to click this button, say 5 or 6 times. Next is add note. And again, this is just something to annotate your survey. So this is very useful as you are going through, say, different iterations of your survey, or if you are collaborating with another person, you can maybe leave a note. So, for instance, if I could say, please check this later, I'll click that there, and it becomes just a little note here. These notes will never display to your respondents. So if you don't remove them by the time that you launch your survey, don't worry, this won't really come up for anybody else. This is just a way for you to kind of keep notes about maybe the creation of your survey, or to leave notes for others. And then lastly is preview question. So as you are building these questions out, if you want to see what it would look like in your survey template already, you can click on preview question, and it just kind of shows you what that survey question would look like. You also have an option as you are building to come up here to this top blue button that says preview. If I click on that, that'll open up a preview window, and this is where you can preview your entire survey. So for instance, if I want to make sure that my display logic or skip logic that we set up here works correctly, I can kind of play around with different options. I can click through my survey. and test it out. I can also see how it will display to respondents. You also have an option up here to see what it would look like on a mobile device. As we know, I think at this point, a majority of survey respondents take the surveys on mobile devices. So if you're concerned about layout or spacing of anything, you can see what it would look like on a mobile device. This preview pop-up window is also very useful as you might be kind of editing or asking others to give input or feedback on your survey. So as I mentioned to you before, you have an option of collaborating or sharing surveys with other users, and that's usually done with that collaborate button that I showed at the beginning. But that's also dependent upon the other person having a Qualtrics account and you wanting to give them permission to view or edit your survey. But in this case, this preview kind of URL that comes up here, if I copied and pasted this or sent this to any number of people, they can come into this preview mode and kind of take my survey and tell me, if they see anything that looks strange or if they see any typos, or a lot of times I'll ask people to preview my survey and ask them to take it as if they were a normal respondent so that I can time how long it would take for somebody to complete the survey. So there's a lot that can be done with this preview button, or excuse me, this preview URL. It will record any responses given as a preview so that you can easily sort them out and delete them later. But it's just something that's very useful and something I would definitely recommend doing as you're going through your building process.
Question, Chris.
Yes.
I think it's a great, this key feature of preview. Can we have that notes section where they can provide feedback on the questions as they're going through it? Are they able to do that?
Not on the preview survey, unfortunately. Only people who have access to the survey editor like this can leave these notes. So yeah, that is one drawback. But again, at least on the other hand, if you're sending it to somebody who doesn't have a Qualtrics account, or say that you don't want them to have access to edit the survey, you just want their feedback so that only you can make changes, this would, I think, be a better option.
Okay. And you may have already covered this, but when you're talking about that skip logic, they answer a question and they have to respond to why they responded that way. In a survey that we put together, we have the question and it may be on a mental health issue or whatever, and we just wanted to leave open a comment box in case they wanted to elaborate on their response, but it's not required. Like I said, it's voluntary. That wouldn't involve that skip logic question sequence, would it? It would just be another comment box, text box underneath that question?
Yes, correct. So you would only need to set up this display or skip logic if it's a conditional question.
Okay.
But if it's just an open-ended text box for anybody to leave additional comments, no, you wouldn't have to set up anything like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so that's kind of building your survey. A few other things I want to point out here. So one, as you are writing your survey text for the questions and responses, it's very easy. As you can see, all of them are set up so that you just click in there and you can begin writing, typing out your question text. It's very easy to copy and paste things in Qualtrics. So say, for instance, you have your survey or you built it in, say, a Word document, you can easily copy and paste in here. As I mentioned before, it also recognizes line breaks. So again, if you have everything kind of laid out on individual questions, or excuse me, individual response choices, if you click here and paste them all in, it will separate them into each individual choice. So it becomes pretty an intuitive system that you can easily and quickly build surveys in. As you are writing your text out here as well, you have this option to go to Rich Content Editor. Clicking that box then brings up this menu of options where you can change everything about the font, the size, bold, italicized, underline. You can change your alignment here. You can also insert a number of different things like full files, pictures, and even videos here. So if you ever have a survey project where you want somebody to watch a video, you can insert that here or embed it in the survey itself. Qualtrics does work best with YouTube if possible. It takes the YouTube URLs very easily and embeds them easily in here. I haven't used videos too much, but I know that they work pretty well. You also have, as I mentioned, an option to do a file. So if you want there to be a link for a downloadable file that you might want somebody to review while taking your survey or ahead of time, you can do that as well. And then the same thing here with a graphic or a picture. You can easily update your question type to include, or excuse me, your question text to include any of these inserts as well.
Do you have the opportunity to have color text?
Yes, you can. It's right here. So if I highlight that, I can change this to red.
Oh, perfect. Oh, okay.
Here's actually the background text as well. So for instance, if I just wanted this to be highlighted, I can do something like that.
Oh, cool. Okay. Thank you.
And then the last thing I want to just point out here is the option to link text. So a lot of times I will recommend, especially if you're referencing other documents or other definitions or anything like that, I would recommend linking out to some of these other things. Or in the case of a lot of different campus forms and applications, we might link out the text to another website or another person's email or something like that. So that can easily be done here with the link option. And all of this that I just pointed out for question text is also available for individual responses. You just click this drop down, it can go to Rich Content Editor, and it'll accomplish the exact same thing. With multiple choice question text, one other thing I want to point out in this drop down menu is this option to allow text entry. So these often become useful when you have an answer choice of other and you want somebody to specify what other could mean for them. This is where you can just allow a little text box to pop up with that response option. So I just wanted to point that out as something that's used quite often. Okay, so at this point, let's say our survey is ready to go. We're all done and we want to start launching it to begin collection. A couple of things I wanted to point out before getting to that point. One is you have an option to change the look and feel of the survey. So in this case, we have a Fresno State template here. For student level accounts, I don't believe the Fresno State template comes up here, but you have options of other preset templates that you can use from Qualtrics. You also can just individually change each color, font, spacing, everything about your survey as it displays to your respondent. You can change all those options here in this menu. Just be sure to click that save button. I have unfortunately spent a lot of time doing this and forgot to click save or click to cancel by accident. You have to start all over. So just make sure you click save. Next thing I want to point out here under survey options is the ability to have a back button. So as I mentioned to you before, I like to minimize the amount of vertical scrolling. Instead, I'll add page breaks so people go forward and backward. By default, there is no back button. So if you want people to be able to go back to a previous page, you'll have to come in here and enable that back button. And then lastly, under tools, one thing I just want to point out, always useful under review, you can do spell check. So I always recommend doing spell check before launching a survey project, just to make sure there are no typos, anything in there. Okay.
Question, Chris.
Yes.
For the, I think you were under survey options, that save and continue option.
Right.
All respondents can save and okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that wasn't just to make changes. So they can, finish the first 5 questions and then they can stop and they can go back and they can resume on question 6, right?
Theoretically, yes. This is by default checked here. So you can always have the option to save and continue. The strange thing with Qualtrics, though, is that in order for that to essentially work, the respondent would have to come back in to the survey using the same device, IP address, and browser in order for it to pick up and recognize that, and also not have cleared their cookies out or cleared cache. So it isn't 100% set up so that you can easily come back and continue where you left off. There are other options that are a little bit more advanced, but say, for instance, if you want to send it out to what's called a contact list using the Qualtrics email system, that will generate unique individual links for each person. And then that link will be easily accessed and that you can save and continue using those. But with the general link, this is a little bit more finicky. So I would just caution against expecting any respondent to start a few questions and then come back in, say, a day or two later, and they'd be able to pick up where they left off.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so say you're ready to launch your survey. You can come up here to this green publish button. As you see here, it also comes up with what they call expert review. It's Qualtrics' kind of built-in algorithm to look at best practices and compare to your survey. You can always click on this blue view recommendations button, and you can see where they might have, you know, something like a survey error or something that's caution. Everything will come up either yellow or red, depending on, I guess, how severe they think of a violation it might be. But just know that this is just another layer of kind of helping you edit your survey. But
would this involve like accessibility issues for those?
Yes, it would actually. So if you had accessibility issues, they would come up. So for instance, there's even, if you're trying to optimize for mobile devices, if a question type that you created is a little bit too wide or doesn't display well, you'll see it kind of flagged on here for that. Oh, here it is. I was like, I knew there was an accessibility. It was also right here. You would also see anything flagged. It would be an accessibility issue. Again, it depends on the question type, individual options that you set up for that question, spacing and so forth. So it'll be flagged here for you to review before you launch.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. So once you are ready to go and you click this blue publish button, that will then activate your survey and create this unique survey link for your survey. These are entirely unique. So this survey ID that that is here at the end will never change. So if you activate your survey and you sent it to somebody, you know, and then you realize, oh, I need to make a change to it, you don't have to come back in here and send them a new survey link. This will always stay the same. And again, this is the general, called the anonymous link here. So this isn't going to collect any information about the respondents that doesn't really maybe exist on your survey questions. And this can be taken over and over again, of course, depending on the survey options that you set up.
Chris, may I ask a question?
Yes.
How do you change the name? Can you change the name using the same link? I know there's something in here that says you can name it something else, name that link, but I don't know how to activate it. I mean, even if I type in the name, like what I want to call the survey, right?
Right. Well, what you call the survey is what you named it to begin with, and you can always edit that right up here. That's what's going to display in your Qualtrics account.
Okay.
But I think what you're talking about is actually what I was going to come to next, which is under Distributions tab. So thank you for the transition there.
Mm-hmm.
So under Distributions, this is where you can also get your anonymous link again. So say you didn't copy it or paste it or write it down or anything from that previous pop-up menu that came up. You can always come under Distributions and go to Anonymous Link, and you get this right here. I think what you're referring to is this customize link, and this is where you type out, a link text, and then you basically copy this and paste that, and you see that the HTML, the text, the URL that will be behind this text is your normal survey link that you get up here, but instead you've just typed it out. So
so I would cut and paste this bottom link. I see.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Name into, say, for instance, an email to send it to someone, and they would get the link. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. I couldn't figure that one out.
Oh, no
Chris, that's a good question. Chris, when doesn't that? I remember trying to do that one time. It just would not work. So, are there some limitations in doing this?
In setting up link text?
Right, and typing it out and then copying the MPH survey, student survey, you copy it and you put it in an email or in a letter or some form, and it's just not activated.
Oh, it could be that if it wasn't activated, that it could be you accidentally maybe clicked this pause response collection button. As I mentioned in the beginning, you have different status, a different status for each individual survey. So you could have new, which means you haven't activated yet, you've just been building it. You can have active, which means the survey link is open and available for data collection. And then you can have closed or paused, which is this right here. So it could be that if you tried this before, perhaps the link itself was paused or closed by accident.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. A couple other things to point out here under distributions. So again, I'm just going to briefly mention this because it gets a little bit more complicated, but you have an option of sending out emails through Qualtrics distribution here. This, like I said, will create individual links for everybody on a list that you have to upload, and that would be uploaded up here into your contacts list. There are a few extra steps to go through with this, but should you need to distribute with individual links, please feel free to email me and I can help walk you through that process and help you set that up. And then lastly, I just want to mention QR codes. So by default, every survey gets a unique anonymous link and a unique QR code. So if you're doing, flyers, or you want somebody to be able to just quickly access the survey rather than sending it out to each individual person or sending people links, you can have a QR code. They can scan that and take them right into your survey as well. Okay. So just kind of moving forward, and I think we're just about out of time, so I'm going to try and go through this really quickly. Under data and analysis, this is where you can view individual responses that come in. This is also, most importantly, where you can export all of your data. So you click on this export and import, export data, and you get different options. By default, it'll go to CSV, which is, as you can tell, kind of essentially an Excel document, but you can choose the format here. This will download all of your response data in a nice spreadsheet, individual row level data. You also have the option of exporting to SPSS. So I know this can be extremely useful as you're doing, say, statistical analyses. What's nice about the export in SPSS is that it will automatically save your file with your raw data with labels and values. So you can easily toggle those back and forth. You don't have to keep creating each individual label for each response choice. So that comes out automatically with the SPSS export. And then lastly, just to briefly go into reports here, again, by default, Qualtrics will create a default summary report of your survey. As you can see here, it's already set up, ready to go. It's just waiting for responses to come in. So I think by default, it gives you a kind of bar chart as well as just kind of a simple statistics table right here. You can get means, min, max, standard deviation. You also get an idea of how many people and what percentage of people responded to a question in a given way. These visualizations are set up on a question by question basis. So again, what I was just kind of looking at here is for question 1. If I can go to question 3. Same set will be displaying for that question. As individual responses come in, these will automatically update. So you can come in here daily or every hour or something like that. If new responses are coming into your survey, these will then funnel into these summary reports, and you can get a quick snapshot of how your survey responses are looking. Within reports, there's a lot more that you can kind of edit, you can customize. So if I clicked into this, I can change the visualization type. So for instance, if I don't want a bar chart, say I want a line chart, I can change that here. Pie charts, breakdown bars. So there's a lot of different visualization options you have here. You can also change what I like to do is use breakout options. So say you want to see all of the response options, but broken out by, say, student level or male, female, something like that. You can do breakouts right here as long as those data exist in your data set. You also have a lot more options of coloring. You can have bar labels here. Again, there's a lot that you can play around with and customize in your default summary reports. But again, this is just a very useful, quick tool to visualize and summarize your data as it's coming in. All right. So in a very quick 45, 50 minutes, that was essentially start to finish, a very introductory kind of session, I will say, but I think kind of covers a little bit of all components of Qualtrics. As I've gone through this, as you can tell, there are a lot more drop-down menus, a lot more options that I didn't have time to cover here, but can become very useful as you're going through your projects. And again, feel free to email me with questions. I will also note that qualtrics.com/support has a lot of video tutorials and a lot of nice walkthroughs. So if you're also in need of quick answers there, you can go there, type out a question, and their support side is very good at giving you some kind of step-by-step visual instructions of how to set up different things. So again, I want to open it up for any other questions.
Thank you, Chris. This was very helpful. What resource, for example, if we develop a survey and everything, would it be possible for someone in your center to review it just to make sure we're doing it correctly? Or if we have any specific issues, is that something that you provide that service?
Yes, absolutely. We in OIE, we're a team of about 6 right now. We also typically have anywhere from 1 to 3 student research assistants working with us as well. So we always kind of offer that for anybody that we're helping, especially when you're building your surveys. You want to make sure that you end up with the best survey possible. So we on the OIE team, we're happy to help kind of review, give feedback. As I mentioned, our student RAs can also kind of review to give their input. And they are a very valuable resource, again, because they are students. So as you know, that most of the time we're surveying our students, so we might have a different lens than, say, a potential student respondent would have. So they can also give insight into that as well.
Okay. Do you actually provide the service that you'll help us actually generate the questions and create the survey at all? Or your services are limited for that? Because some of us have limited resources and time to be able to create some of these surveys. But is that something you may offer, or?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. I mean, there are a lot of times when we can help with survey projects. Say you have ideas of what you want to ask, but you're not quite sure how to word those questions. We can kind of help wordsmith those a little bit. Or again, if you have your survey already ready to go, or it's already built or set up in Word, and you just need to be able to build it in Qualtrics, that's also something we can help with. Send it over to us, and we can help build that. Again, I will just note that most of the time we open that up to staff and faculty. For students, again, we want them to be able to learn the product or learn the tool themselves, so we can help guide them. But generally speaking, for student projects, we wouldn't necessarily offer to build the surveys for them.
No, I totally appreciate it, because for a research project, we're trying to get funding, but our funds are limited. But if that support is there to create the survey, that is fantastic. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was very helpful.
Yes,
Very
welcome.
On behalf of the Master Public Health Program, thank you for your time. Appreciate your contribution to the development of our students and our faculty as well. Thank you both for joining us, Ruth and Mary. Like I mentioned, we'll be captioning the video and putting it up on our YouTube site so that it's available to people whenever they want to see it. So again, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good afternoon.